Who remembers me from last year? Who was here? Yeah, quite a few of you. So I used to be a state patrol inspector, and then I was an investigator with the federal government. I now work for this company called Reliance Partners. We're an insurance brokerage out of Chattanooga, got locations all over the country. So that's me. Like I said, state patrol guy, investigator with the federal government, hazmat agent, 23 years government regulator. So my goal today is to have you walk through the door and leave knowing more than when you walked in. Fair enough? And I know we've had a lot of sessions here today. I'm going to try to make it a good one. So let's talk. The big piece, and I'll tell you, you guys went through this class yesterday with these attorneys, right? A big piece to today is what bothers you as a company. Where do you find your biggest risks to be? Whether you have a fleet of vehicles or you don't, right? Vehicles, and I was talking about this a second ago. Vehicles are one of the biggest concerns we have because you can get in a crash. And if you get in a crash, you get a lawsuit. So how do we protect ourselves from that? Now, some people in the room might be like, I don't have any trucks. The problem there is you hire companies that have trucks to move your freight. So are those companies any good? And I don't mean to scare you, but about 30 minutes into here, I'm going to show you a company that, and I was joking with some people yesterday, literally they're a shit sandwich. They're not an ice cream sandwich, they're a crap sandwich, right? Now, are you truly understanding the type of companies that come pick up your freight at your facilities? If you don't have any clue whether they're good or bad, you're open up to risk. If you have your own fleet and you get in a crash, you're opened up to risk. Fair enough? So that's the main part about what we're going to talk about. Now, in order to have a safe operation, you have to have a safety culture, right? So this safety management cycle, when I was a federal investigator, they'd have me come knock on the door and do full reviews of companies to make sure they were safe. Whether it's your fleet that you have or it's the fleet of the companies you're hiring to move your stuff. Either way, you're opened up to risk. The government made me use this to try to improve your operation, right? And as it relates to safety, we can talk about hours of service. That's one of the biggest problems that we would have. If a driver crashes and he falls asleep and he's over hours during the crash, that is a huge susceptibility to a lawsuit. So with hours of service, do we have a policy and procedure as a fleet to make sure that the drivers stay within their hours of service? Now, what are the roles to make sure that happens? The driver has to be educated on the hours of service. He has to follow them. What's the role of management? The role of management is to make sure that the drivers are educated in following those rules. Now, again, the companies we're hiring would have to follow the same protocol. Are we hiring good drivers? Training and communication. Are the companies that we have in this room with a fleet properly training our drivers to follow those hours of service? i.e., or are the companies that we're hiring to move our freight training their drivers? Monitoring and tracking. How well are we monitoring and tracking the companies that we're using or ourselves to make sure hours of service are met? And then what kind of meaningful action do we take? This is a safety management cycle that the government wants us to use. I joke around. I have a 18-year-old daughter now, and she is going to UW Milwaukee, right? And she went to go visit the campus, and she was going to stay overnight with a friend, right? And I told her, I said, don't drink, don't do drugs, and don't get pregnant, right? So I told her those things. And then the meaningful action, I told her, if you do those things, I'll probably kill you, right? So if we take this process, so the procedure was you can go to UW Milwaukee for your visit, but don't do drugs, don't get pregnant, and don't drink, right? What's her role? Her role is to not do those things. My role is to make sure she didn't. Qualification and hiring, like I said, I could always just kick her out because she's 18. Training and communication, I train her how to tell time and not do drugs, etc. Monitoring and tracking, in my end table, I put a pregnancy kit and a drug kit and a breathalyzer. So, no, I'm just kidding. But then I would kill her if she came home pregnant. So we use this in our regular day lives, so we should be able to use it for the government as well. Now, CSA, who's heard of that? Anybody? CSA? All right, CSA is a system that the government uses to monitor companies who have a US DOT number on the door. Every roadside that happens for a 2-year period is put into this database. And the government analyzes all the companies in that database to decide who to come knock on the door. So let's say that you have 40 trucks, and you have 40 trucks, and you have 40 trucks. So we have 3 companies with 40 trucks. You get pulled over, never. And when you do, you have 0 violations. When you get pulled over, every single time you have 5 violations. Who's going to have higher scores? you're going to have higher scores. Now, the government, it's kind of like a curve. The government will come knock on your door if you have high scores. Now, of the 3 of these, with hours of service, one of you 3 is going to be in what's called an alert, right? That means no matter what, 1 out of 3 companies are going to potentially get a visit from the government. Even if you improve, and you used to have every roadside with 5 violations, and now you only have every other one, and it's only 2 violations, so we're doing better. He still has 0. If he has 1 per truck, you still have more than him. So it doesn't matter how well you do, it's how well you do compared to everybody else. Fair enough? Now, are these CSA points and scores open to almost everybody? Yeah. So the government uses this to knock on company doors and do reviews, to decide who to do. Who else uses CSA, do you think? This from yesterday. Who is this page filled with? Attorneys. So now they're trying to protect you, these attorneys yesterday. What about the other attorneys that are trying to sue you? They use this to show that either your fleet is no good or the fleet of the companies that you're hiring are no good. Could they find you negligent if a truck comes to your lot that has bad CSA scores? Yeah. So now, some of you just kind of in the room, help me out because we're just chatting. How many of you don't have a fleet and hire trucking companies to haul your stuff? All right. Are you using freight brokers? Right? Is the freight broker using this system? There are some freight brokers that won't even look at this. There's other freight brokers that live by it, right? So that's a big piece. So CSA is the government, litigation, customers. Now, when I say customers, I mean you, right? If you're hiring a fleet of vehicles to come to your facility, you are a shipper and or a receiver, right? You're the one distributing. Some customers have contracts, like Coca-Cola does, that says if you have elevated CSA scores or a conditional rating, which we're going to talk about in a second, you can no longer haul for us. So I've had companies where I've done a review of their operation because they had high scores, found them to be non-compliant, gave them an adverse rating, and they lost contracts because they won't do it. You guys know it's Transco. Ever heard of them? Big food producer, right? They have it in their contract. Coke has it. Pepsi has it. A lot of big distributors have this in their contract. So CSA is those 3 things. And the last thing is insurance. Underwriters, for your insurance, if you have a fleet of vehicles, underwriters will absolutely look at CSA score to jack your rates up. Because if this is risky, they think you're risky. Now, at the same token, if you're hiring a really bad trucking company, like one that has high scores, they're paying more on insurance. In some cases, double, triple, quadruple what somebody else is that's the same size as them. So now, let's just take it for hypothetical again. Let's say that you are in good shape and then you have a rash of bad inspections. You see what I'm saying? And your insurance rates go up. How does he make up for the expense of his insurance? He has to cut costs somewhere else. Where does he do that? If he's got a fleet of vehicles, maintenance, you can't neglect fuel, right? You got to pay the people or else they're going to quit. So what do you do to cut the corner? It's going to have to be maintenance or push the guys harder and violate hours of service. So it's this endless cycle. So CSA is 4-fold. Number 1, insurance. Number 2, litigation. Number 3, the government. And number 4, would be customers, which in this case, I'm trying to get you guys to understand what volatility this is. So CSA, what they do is they break this into 7 groups. See where it says unsafe driving right here? That's speeding, following too close, lane deviation, etc. Crashes, how many DOT crashes do you have? Hours of service is your logbooks. Vehicle maintenance is what does your truck look like? Drug and alcohol is, are you drunk or on drugs? Who here would want to have a trucking company come to their facility when in a public record, you can see it right in the public, they've got 3 or 4 drug charges of their drivers operating a truck? Can you look right now at every one of the companies that come to your facility to move stuff, write their DOT number down and see if they have any drug charges? Yeah, it's open to the public. Now, if it's open to the public and you can see it without a password, do you think the litigators could see it and hold that against you? Of course, right? Hazardous material, nothing here. Driver fitness is their CDLs. How well do they do? So now, these percentages, these are your CSA scores. This is a company in Wisconsin, so unsafe driving, 56%. These are your basics. If you have a little triangle on the basic, which I'm going to show you in a second, that means it's an alert and the government is likely to come knock on your door. So these are the different basics. What 56% means is this. I'm going to use this table here. They break it into 5 peer groups, this data system. You're like Schneider National, and you're like Rail Transport, which has got about 3,000 trucks. You say you have like 100 trucks, small 100 truck company, you have 40, and he's Joe Bob the Ragman trucker, right? He's got 1 truck, right? So now, they do not compare Joe Bob the Ragman against Schneider. It's not fair because they're different sizes, right? So they compare you against all the Schneiders. Well, this company is about 100 trucks, this one right here. So out of all the companies in the whole United States, 56% of the companies are better than this one. 56%. So you see this company as in how they operate, seatbelt, texting, following too close, all that is right in middle ground, right? You don't want to be 99%. That means 99% of the companies in the United States are better than you. And if you hit certain thresholds, a little alert, they'll come knock on your door and do a review. Is this company at the thresholds for an alert? No. 65% is this number. Once you hit 65, it turns red and you get an alert and then you're likely to get a visit. So you see how this company is kind of on the edge, on the border, at least with this. But everything else looks pretty good. You know, 9%, 6%, 0, not enough bad inspections. So they need to concentrate on how they drive. Fair enough? So these are the basics. 65%, every company here has got an alert. Some shippers won't give them freight, some brokers won't give them freight, and the government's likely to knock on their door. This company right here is at 56%. And I'll tell you, this company's now at 17%. This was from a year ago. So now here's a historical part of this data. They used to be at 38% in December of 15. They moved up to 73%, and then it fell all the way back down to 20%. It only takes maybe, for a company with 100 trucks, 6 or 7 speeding violations, warnings, or tickets to elevate to that score. So these companies really got to be on top of their safety. Fair enough? So these are all the different basics. You see this little triangle? That was an alert that they had for 1 month. But you see, in 1 month, they jumped up 16 points and immediately fell back down 16 points. That's how quick and volatile this system can be. But you understand what attorneys can do to the CSA scoring system. So here's how it works. See this 3? 3 is a multiplier. If you get in trouble for speeding, let's say you're going 11 to 14 right now, and you get a warning, right? And he got a ticket 18 months ago, 11 to 14. They take 7 points in this system for 11 to 14. It's a stated amount. Multiply it by 3, giving you 21 points, right? Then after the violation is 6 months old, they multiply it by 2. So it'd be 7 times 2 is 14. Then when the violation's a year old and not 2 years old, it's times 1. So if you got a violation for 11 to 14 today, it would be 21 points. You got a violation 9 months ago, it would be 14 points. You were 18 months ago, it would be 7 points. And it takes 2 years to drop this off. Imagine that. I hire him today, he speeds tomorrow, I fire him the next day, I got to live with his violations for 2 years. It takes that long for them to fall off. So you see how this works. And the government is analyzing this, and it affects all those areas that we talked about. So this is how many violations they had. Now, there's a trick to this, which isn't even fair. See this where it says conviction of a different charge? If you get a citation, and this isn't even right, if you get a citation and you go to court and get it dismissed or reduced, they reduce your points. So right here, see how this speeding 15 over is only 1 point. But speeding 11 to 14 right here is 7 points. How come speeding 15 over is 1 point where this is 7? So this would be 1 times 3 is 3. This is 7 times 3 is 21 plus this other one is 30 points. Because he went to court and got it reduced, you can go online and challenge it and they'll change the point amount. If you go to court and get it dismissed, they'll completely remove it. This company, should they be at 73%? No. They should be like at 90%. Because they're getting these tickets removed and dismissed, etc. So you see the game that trucking companies play to keep this score within reason. But all of this stuff is open to the public. It's on a website. I could look up everybody's company here that has a DOT number right now and look at all your roadsides for 2 years. It's all in this system. So now if it's in here, should you be monitoring it? What if your driver got pulled over and never told you? I can tell you right now who got pulled over because I can look it up. So here's the 2. And then here's the 1. So this is how many violations this company had in 2 years. Quite a few, right? So now, I want to show you guys something that is, I'm not saying it's going to blow your mind, but it might. Escape, Google. This right here is a program that the insurance underwriters use. It's called CAB. It takes all that data online, and for a fee, companies can buy it. So C.H. Robinson, Arrive Logistics, Strive, Chop Tank, Echo, some of those big freight brokers, they all purchase it. Every one of our insurance companies, for the most part, have this system. You see this right here? What are these? This is this company's scores. So unsafe driving, 92%. Logbooks, 99%. Controlled substance, 57%. Vehicle maintenance, 89. Crashes, 94, right? And I'm going to I think that we're just missing a couple. And their driver fitness is NA, right? So now you see these little blocks right here? This means on August 7, 2018, 3 months ago, the government went like this to this company. Who thinks the government should have come to this company? Absolutely. They're a crap sandwich, right? So what did they get violated for when the government knocked on the door? They didn't have logbooks. They didn't have driver vehicle inspection reports at the end of the day for their vehicles. They had drivers testing positive for drugs and alcohol. They've had 3 inspections in the last 2 years where someone was on drugs or had narcotics in their truck. And then they had drivers without CDLs. Are you protecting your company to make sure one of these companies don't come? And here's the part that's scary, right? If you use a freight broker, that's the only place these people get freight from. They only get it from brokers. So if you're vetting your own carriers, right, like you're hiring your own trucking companies and they're local and you've got good relationships, you should monitor them. Who knows what they look like? But at the same token, if you're going to a freight broker, this is the entity that you potentially will have coming into your lot. Now, how do you do this? You can simply go out to your lot at some point, if this ever happens to you, and just take a picture of the DOT number, go and enter the DOT number online to see what the company looks like. Fair enough? So now I want to go here to show you this. So now, see how this says conditional rating. It's got this thing that says conditional. There are 3 reviews that the government uses. When the government comes and knocks on the door, they give companies ratings. One is satisfactory, one is unsatisfactory, and conditional. And non-rated, I'm sorry. They have unsatisfactory, conditional, satisfactory, and non-rated. Non-rated means you've never had a review ever. You can't have a rating if you've never had a review, so they make you non-rated. If you've had a review, a full review in the past, and you passed it and did well, you'd be satisfactory. This company had so many violations, that now they're conditional. So insurance companies increase rates based on that as well. So now monitoring your scores are important. This whole CSA thing is going to flip on its end in about 2 years, right? In about 2 years, they're changing the formulas for the analysis of companies with a DOT number nationwide. Probably 2 or 3 years. You guys know what an ACT is, right? Like to go to college, right? And you know how you take your ACT and they give you a total score, but then you can look at the subjects and see where the scores are. They had hired like 16 PhD professors to analyze this system, and that's what this article is about. And in about 2 or 3 years, not yet, they're still going to use this system, but they're going to change it. Companies are going to get one total score, and they're not going to be broken into peer groups anymore. And the score will be high if you have violations across all different areas, right? Like means you're no good anywhere. You know how the first company we had that only was bad in unsafe driving, but everything else looked good? That means that they have some good core values at their company. They just need to control speed and operation. You see what I mean? That other company that had violations across the board, they're actually going to look worse in the new system because they don't have controls anywhere. Does that make sense? So same thing with you. If you don't have controls across the board, you could have very few inspections and end up in a situation where the government will come knock on your door if you have a DOT number. So last year I talked about the coercion rule. Do you guys remember that? I have great news. Last year I said that if a driver comes in to your facility and he's loaded and you make him leave, you could be subject to a lawsuit under the coercion rule. Remember that? And that was scary as hell. June of 2018, they changed the hours of service. It's called personal conveyance, right? I talked about it last year, but it said you couldn't have a load. You can now be loaded and use personal conveyance. It's been legal since June. So now if we have a trucking company come to our lot and we don't want him to stay there and he's over hours, the trucking company can use personal conveyance and drive off duty to a truck stop or a nearby location to get some rest. So it has now reduced our susceptibility and potential problems with getting a coercion rule complaint. I mean, not 100%, but pretty good. Now, what you would want to ask is, you guys have either dedicated trucking companies coming to your place, or you have your own drivers, or freight brokers might be monitoring your activity. Companies don't have to let their drivers use personal conveyance. I try to get every trucking company that I know, or anybody with a truck, that when you're over hours and you're forced to leave a location, you should at least use personal conveyance then. If you're a company and you don't want the drivers to be driving around off duty at other points in the day, so be it. But at least to protect yourself against coercion, give the drivers an out when they're at your facility. It's possible that you have a trucking company that comes that has told their drivers they can't use it at all. Short-minded thinking, you see what I mean? And it still puts you in a liability perspective. So if you have 5, 6 companies that come to your facility, ask them, hey, do you promote personal conveyance when we're over hours at our lot to allow the guy to drive to the truck stop that's up the road? If they say no, a conversation would be good, right? Because now you're telling the trucking company that you don't want a potential coercion violation, so we encourage you, trucking company, to at least use this rule when you're stuck on my lot and I don't want to get a complaint from the government, right? Now, what does that exactly say? Now remember, the coercion rule is a threat by a shipper or receiver, which could be any one of us, or a motor carrier. Even if you have your own private fleet, you're a private motor carrier. So any threat by any of these to a driver to withhold business or work opportunities, requiring him to violate any regulation, which are any of these, remember hours of service being a big one, could subject you to a complaint from the government. Now, I put all these 4 slides on here as just a reminder, right? Now, log falsification. 2 things that we can have drivers do, and I brought them up last year, but I want to update personal conveyance this year. Drivers can drive their trucks in the off-duty status legally. That's personal conveyance. Drivers can also drive their trucks on a shipper facility in yard move, which is the on-duty line. You see what I'm saying? So we ultimately have drivers that can operate off-duty or on-duty driving and not be in violation, right? So personal conveyance is the first one. Here's what they said. When a trucking company is relieving their driver from all work, they used to say short distance, they got rid of it. They used to say unladen, now you can have freight. So you can be loaded or unloaded, get rid of short distance. As long as the driver's not working, he can drive with his little computer ELD in the off-duty status, completely legal. Then they broke it down further in the guidance. It says, appropriate uses are the next 7 I'm going to go through. Then it says they include but are not limited to. So let's talk about when a truck driver can drive off-duty and not be in violation of your hours of service, right? And you know how drivers, and I'm gonna go over it, but they need a 30-minute break or a 10-hour break? You can actually drive to a truck stop loaded, and it'll be part of your 10-hour break. How many companies are using this? Not a whole lot, but they need to. You see how it's beneficial, right? So if a driver is going to, if he's en route lodging, which is a motel or a truck stop, so if a driver is hauling your freight from point A to point B, and he is at a truck stop, and he's been there for 8 hours, and the only food there is Wendy's, but he can go to like a Whole Foods and get like the salad bar up the street, he can take his truck loaded, drive it from the truck stop up to the Whole Foods, get lunch, and come back, all off duty with freight in his truck using personal conveyance. Why can he do that? Because this is the federal document, and it clearly says time spent traveling from en route lodging to restaurants or entertainment facilities. Can he go watch a movie? He can go watch a movie. If he's on a 10-hour break, he could sleep for 6, get up, go watch solo, and then come back and take another nap and then leave. Is that part of his 10-hour break? It absolutely is, right? So that's the first one. Second one says that if you are at a terminal, which would be the company location, or a drop lot for trailers, so any pre-staged area where there's drop lots. Now, if you have a driver that's not at your facility, but he parks in a prepaid parking lot, that's a terminal. So anywhere the driver reports, anywhere he drops trailers, right, he can go to and from his residence with no distance restriction and no time restriction. So if this is your terminal, right here, that's your terminal, and he lives 62 miles away, can he leave your terminal, push personal conveyance, and drive off duty all the way over there? The answer is yes. Can he do it with a load? Yes. As long as it's not to the benefit of the carrier. That's what this says. You can't be benefiting the carrier. Well, when he's going from the terminal to go home, it's not benefiting the carrier, it's benefiting him. So you see how clearly he can go from terminal, trailer, drop lots. It does say work sites, but work sites are like for construction guys, right? Now it says time spent to a nearby reasonable safe after loading or unloading. That means if you load and you're at a shipper-receiver facility, you can push personal conveyance and go off duty to the closest truck stop. If you get to that closest truck stop and it's full, I would advise drivers to take a picture of the parking lot to show it's full, because it says you have to go to a nearby reasonable safe. Well, it's nearby and safe, but it isn't reasonable because there's no parking. Now, why would we take a picture? Evidence. We take pictures when trucks crash. Why wouldn't we take a picture when we are potentially going to get pulled over in between the two truck stops? So if here's your shipper, here's the closest truck stop, and the next one's here, and I get pulled over in between, I want to show this one was full, because he's going to say, why didn't you go there? And you'd say it's full with no evidence, he probably won't believe you. So you gather this evidence and then you move on. Here's the problem though. Let's say this is where you're delivering. This is where you picked up. This is the closest one and it's full. The next one is right next to your shipper, but there's one over here. You cannot go to that one. Even though it's in the direction and it's benefiting you and it'd be better to go to this one, it's further away than this one. So you might have to backtrack. Go to this one, it's full. You might have to go right back through here to go to this one because it's closer than that one. So you always have to go to the next nearby location. Does that make sense? So those are the three. If an officer, this is nice, if an officer tells you to move, you're on the side of the road and he says you can't park here. If a safety official says move, you can push personal conveyance and go find the next place. That's 100% fine. Now, it does say include but not limited to. See how open-ended that is? I don't know why the government did it, but they did it. You cannot do it to enhance your readiness, your operational readiness. You can't pass up 2 truck stops and go to the one across the street from where you're delivering tomorrow. That's enhancing your readiness, right? Just because you don't have a trailer on and you're bobtailing to go pick up another trailer, that's still work. Basically, if it's work, you can't do it. If you're not working, you can, right? So bobtailing, towed unit, etc. If you can't do it to perform maintenance. So if anybody has any owner-operators, right, that are independent contractors, they do their own maintenance. They can't do this and use personal conveyance. If you are placed out of service would be like, the guy with the 99% hours of service, he's been placed out of service 1 billion times. If an officer places you out of service for hours of service to the roadside and says, hey, it's not safe to sit here, you can use personal conveyance and drive to a truck stop. If the officer is directing you. Now this is kind of a tricky one. Time spent traveling to a motor carrier terminal after loading and unloading. If you load here, and there's a truck stop here, and your terminal's there, you cannot use PC to go to your terminal, right? If your terminal is here, and the nearest place to park is there, then you can go to your terminal. Even though this says you cannot load and unload and go to your terminal happens to be the nearby reasonable safe location. So that trumps that. You see what I'm saying? But how many drivers in the country right now, and it's almost an epidemic, how many drivers are loading and unloading, going PC and driving 200 miles to their terminal? They think that's okay because they just loaded or unloaded. They can just go PC all the way to their terminal, and they can't. So then yard move. Remember the definition last year of a highway? A highway is a road, street, or a way on public or private property. So let's pretend that you're a distributor, right? You have a warehouse. Is your warehouse parking lot a highway? Let's just go through it to make sure. Is it a road or a street, the parking lot? No. But is it a way passable by four-wheel standard cars? Yes. Is it on private property? Yes. Is it open to the public? Well, you must have those restrictive gates and prohibitive signs. So if you have a facility and you want to allow the trucking companies that come onto our facility or your own drivers to be able to drive around in the on-duty status, without being in violation on a yard, you would need to have a prohibitive sign at your facility. Fair enough? Now, the government, when they do a knock, they're not going to go to all of our shippers and receiver locations, but if your address on your DOT number is your facility and they're driving to our company to do a review, you should at least have a sign there. You get what I'm saying? They won't be able to prove there wasn't a sign at some other location, right? So, where does this help out? I'm going to get into hours of service a little because I didn't do it much during the last presentation. Where does this help out, this yard moves and personal conveyance? I'm going to go over the hours of service and talk about it. But first, I noticed a lot of people yesterday say, I live in Texas, I stay in Texas. I live in Florida, I stay in Florida, right? Federal regulations are interstate. If you stay in Texas, it's intrastate. You get it? So here's what the government does. They say, okay, this is the federal regulations for hours of service that I'm going to go over, right? In Wisconsin, which is where I'm from, they have a document that says we're not going to rewrite hours of service for state of Wisconsin trucking companies or companies with trucks. We're going to take federal regulation, adopt it, and call it state law. Well, in Wisconsin, the only thing they did different for hours of service, as an example, is they made it so only CDL trucks in Wisconsin need to have hours of service, where if you're interstate, it goes down to a dually pickup truck. Anything over 10,000 pounds crossing state lines or hauling interstate freight is hours of service. In Wisconsin, they don't start till CDL. Illinois, it's at 10,000 pounds. So if you have a dually pickup truck, you're subject to hours of service in Illinois, right? New York, a dually pickup truck in commerce, subject to hours of service, just like the feds. No different, right? So what is the challenge here? There's 48 states. There's representatives here that haul intrastate freight in all these different states. Do I know the intrastate hours of service in all the states you run? No. Should you? Yes. Because if you get in a crash and your driver's over hours and you're violating state law, they can do an investigation and find you liable, right? So now, here's a tricky thing. I don't know if I talked about it last year, but it's important. If you are in a state and you go to a place out of the state, well, that's clear it's interstate, right? You cross state lines. What if you're between two places in the state, but you have to pass through another state because it's the shortest distance? Who here lives in a state where you'd have to pass through another state as a direct line, the shortest route? So if you did that, you're interstate, even though you thought you were intrastate. You have to go around that state. You can't pass through it, or you're interstate. Here's the last one, though. Between two places in a state, but then it says traffic or transportation designated for out of state. So the U.S. mail, if this is a letter and it's got a postage on it and an address to go to Atlanta, Georgia from Wisconsin because I'm paying my credit card bill, and that goes on your truck and it only goes 20 miles within the state of Wisconsin, it's interstate. If the nature of the freight is interstate in nature, based on what the paperwork says, then it's interstate. So it'd be like a distributor here getting an order for something out of state, but then you drive it clear across the state of Texas and then cross-dock it on an LTL operation, give it to another carrier, and they continue the transportation to another state. You're the one that brought it there. That's interstate. So let's say that you are in Miami and you have ice cream right here that you're going to use your own truck to bring to a warehouse to cross-dock, and they're going to ship it out to Georgia. You have a pallet, and the person that ordered the ice cream is the company in Georgia. You generate the pallet, you pack it, everything else, the bill of lading says from here to Georgia. You get it? If you haul it from Miami to Miami, cross-dock it, a trucking company like that one picks it up and brings it to Georgia, you were interstate. So you're not intrastate. So you got to understand that, because then you need an MC number. You're subject to hours of service at 10,000 pounds. Anybody have any questions with that? It's kind of crazy. And does that affect people in the room? Potentially yes, right? So interstate is not just physically where you go, it's the trade as well. Now, the hours of service. Federal hours of service are these. Some states differ. I challenge you to go find out which ones you need to follow if you're in the state. Now, at the same token, you might have trucking companies that come to your facility. The truckers, this is what they have to follow. Is it good for you to know when you're trying to dispatch or understand the trials and tribulations of the driver that comes into your facility? Of course. So here's what it is. If you start at 6 a.m., at 8 p.m., which is 14 hours later, you cannot drive. Now, I said the word drive, right? You cannot drive again. So, can you work past the 14th hour? Yes. That might come in handy for us, right? Can you work after having reached the maximum hours for hours of service if you're subject to them? Yes. The trucking companies that come in, can they work at your facility if they're over hours? Yes. If they're yard move, that's not driving, correct? Yard move is on duty. So if you start at 6 a.m., at 8 p.m., I said you can't drive anymore. Let's say that driver started at 6 a.m., he gets to your facility at 7:45 p.m., and you can't get him in and out in 15 minutes. Can he drive onto your lot, push yard move, and work for the next 2 hours, driving around your lot to get loaded? Now he's at 16 hours, 17, 18 hours. You get what I'm saying? Is he over hours? Many drivers would say, yes, I'm over hours. Did he drive on a highway after the 14th hour? No. So can he continue to work? Yes, it's legal. How many people take advantage of that? None, because they don't know it exists. It clearly says that you cannot drive after having 14 hours. Now, you know what's nice? Let's say he started at 6 a.m. and it's 8 p.m., and then he unloads for 3 hours and he's at 17 hours. Can he drive on a highway? Yes. How? Personal conveyance. He can leave at the 17th hour, push PC, and drive for 38 miles to the nearby reasonable safe truck stop. Are you now susceptible to the coercion rule? No, because he was never over hours. He did a 17-hour workday or 18 hours because he loaded at your facility. How many drivers even understand that? They don't. And that's what we're trying to do, just educate to make this understood, right? Now, in that 14 hours, you cannot drive over 11, right? Can you drive more than 11? Yes. It's called adverse conditions. If there's a crash or unanticipated weather, black ice, etc., you can drive over hours, up to 13 hours every day that you can document a crash or unanticipated weather, black ice, wind, hurricane, whatever it is. You see what I mean? So now, that's allowing you to go from 11 to 13, but you still can't exceed the 14 in that case, right? So everybody understands the 14-hour rule. And when I say 6 a.m., I mean if you start at 5 a.m., it's 7 p.m. If you start at noon, it would be 2 a.m., right? So a 14-hour window. You can't drive after 11, you can't drive after 14. Now, 70-hour rule. Does anybody have that problem? I wouldn't think so, but 70-hour rule is how many hours you've worked in the last 8 days. So if you have worked more than 70 hours in the last 8 days, you can't do what? Drive. Can you work over 70? Yes. So let's say you had an employee that drove or had 14-hour work days Monday through Friday, right? So 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Friday. He just hit 70 in 5 days, correct? He would need what's called a restart to reset his clock or wait 3 more days in order to drive again. But can he work on Saturday at your facility if he's not driving? Yeah. So can he work 70 hours Monday through Friday, then work at your facility the entire day on Saturday? Yes, because then late Saturday, Sunday, and early Monday, he'll get a 34-hour restart and it'll wipe out the whole previous week. Go ahead.
All right, so just going back, you were talking about personal conveyance, heading towards the terminal. There's a spot you can go to that's making 35 miles, right? There's a spot in the opposite direction from where you left that's 32 miles. You can get nailed for that.
Yes. You have to go to the nearby reasonable safe without any thought as to enhancing your ability as a carrier. There's like if it's 32 and a half versus 33 miles. Okay, you know how it says include, comma, but not limited to? Right? It clearly says nearby reasonable safe. So is that the most nearby? No. So now you could potentially convince an officer that it's only another half a mile and it's in a safer location. But you know how officers are. Could they literally take it as literal as the regulation says and hold you to that, right? So what I would say is no. My DOT advisor side says no, you cannot go 33 versus the 32. You have to go in the wrong direction. Yeah. All right, so can you work over the 70? Yes. Can you work over the 14? Yes. Now, 30-minute break. Who thinks that's a pain in the butt? It's a pain, right? Trucking companies don't want to do it, especially if you're local and you do a lot of stuff where you're in and out of the truck. Why do I have to take a 30-minute break? It's stupid. You get it? So now here's the thing. Let's say you start at 6 a.m. and you're going to be 8 p.m. is your day that you're done. Well, if you start at 6 a.m., you need a 30-minute break before 2 p.m., correct? 2 p.m. So by the 8th hour, you need a 30-minute break. But can you do this? You start at 6, 2 p.m., I'm at the facility, and the dock doors are all open, and I'm ready to load. It's my turn. It's my time. The driver says, I need a 30-minute break. He could push yard move and work for 3 hours without a 30-minute break. He just needs a 30-minute break before he does what? Drives. On what? A highway. You get it? So can he start at 6 a.m.? Normally you need a break by 2 p.m. Can he work till 5 p.m.? Do an 11-hour workday without a 30-minute break, then take a 30-minute break at the 11th hour, then go on the road? Yes. Now get this one. You know how you said 32 miles away? Could he start at 6 a.m., 2 p.m., he's loading, go to 5 p.m., that's an 11-hour day. He needs a 30-minute break. Can he push PC and drive to a truck stop for the next 30 minutes? Is that his 30-minute break? Yes. So can you use PC as part of your 30-minute break? Yes. So you could, let's say there's a truck stop 10 minutes away. You could actually be over the 8 hours, work extra, then drive to a truck stop that's 12 minutes away, off-duty PC, get there, and then go 18 minutes off-duty, and that's your 30-minute break. So why am I doing this, right? I'm trying to make you understand that most truck drivers do not understand what I'm telling you. You guys are probably more educated on these hours of service tricks than the average driver in the United States. Whether you're a receiver or a distributor that uses trucking companies, wouldn't it be nice to have a conversation with 3 or 4 of your dedicated carriers and say, listen, man, this dude came and talked to us and he's telling us we can do this, 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 this. That would add flexibility while at my facility, right? To get the job done. Now, is it unsafe? That's what we have to determine. Do you think that the intent of the rule was to work an 11-hour day and then your 30-minute break is driving to a truck stop? Go ahead. Yeah. Okay, here's what I'll tell you. Almost all of them. When I do driver meetings, if you guys are drivers, some of you are like, I never heard of this, right? That's what drivers tell me. They've never heard of this. These are things that they're not utilizing. Why would the entire driver community nationwide not understand this stuff that has been in the regulation for 2 decades? Paper logs. Because if you have paper logs, we just lied. We had paper logs, we lied. We covered up all the inefficiencies of the shipping and receiving channels in the United States with lies and logbooks, right? Now we have ELDs. Can you lie?
But why would the companies that employees not be getting as much as they can out of it?
Oh, I'll tell you this, companies don't even know. When I go talk to the owner of a company with 100 trucks and tell them this, they're like, really? Do this once. Who has drivers in this room? Do your drivers know? Aren't you a company? Why haven't you taught them? Because you didn't know. So you know what I'm saying. And if you do, that's good. But you understand what I'm saying. Knowledge is power. I wanted you to walk through the room and leave knowing more than when you walked in, and I hope I've accomplished that to some level, right? So that's the 30-minute break. 16-hour day. You know you can extend the 14 to 16 hours? If you leave and return to the same spot for the previous 5 work days, which is a lot of us, previous 5 work days, and now CDL truck, right? Well, not really, this is all. If you leave and return to the same spot for the last 5 duty tours, once every 6 days, you can go to 16 hours. So you could do 14, 14, 14, 12, and 16, Monday through Friday, right? So now, previous 5 duty tours. it does say, so let's say this was Thursday, Friday, and then this is Saturday, Sunday, and you're off the weekend, and this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you want to take it. You get it? Can you take one here and have taken one on Friday? That's 2 within 6 days. You're allowed to as long as you have a restart. So let's pretend we're off every weekend, right? We're off every weekend. We only work Monday through Friday. If you leave and return to the same spot every day, you can do a 16-hour day once Monday through Friday. If you do it on Friday, can you do it again on Monday? Yes, because you have a restart on the weekend. So can we train our drivers and say, listen, man, you leave and return to the same spot every single day. One day you can do a 16-hour day. Now, when he does the 16-hour day, what's the problem with the 30-minute break? He doesn't want to take it too early. You want to take the 30-minute break between the 7.5 and the 8th hour. Or you need how many? 2. I just want 1. So you educate your driver. If you think you're going to have a 16-hour day, don't take your 30-minute break until the 7.5-hour mark. That'll bring you to 8, and then you have 8 left. Does that make sense? So that's the 16-hour day. Now, 100 air mile radius driver. 100 air mile radius driver. These are the drivers that don't need a logbook. These are the drivers that you can yank the ELD out of the truck if you have one. This is one exemption that can get the ELD gone. CDL drivers is this one. There's another one I'm going to explain after this one, which is non-CDL trucks between 10 and 26. CDL drivers, if I leave and return and stay within 100 air miles, which is 115 statute miles, that's the first question. Second one, I have to leave and return and go home within 12 hours. 12 hours, why that? But there's some good information with that. So if I leave and return to the same spot and go home within 12, that's the second one. Third one, I need 10 hours off between, I need 10 hours off between my shift, and I can't drive more than 11 in that 12-hour period, and then I need time records. Some document that has time start, time finish, total hours worked. Fair enough? So if I ask you this question, right? Like if I ask you this question, these 5 questions, and you answer them correctly today, you don't need a logbook today. You answer them correctly tomorrow, you don't need a logbook tomorrow. You can just use a time card kept at the company, you don't even have a logbook, right? Now, if you do a 13-hour workday, do you need a logbook? Yes, just for that day though. That's it, just that day. Now, if you need a paper logbook more than 8 days out of 30, then that time card has to be an ELD. You have to put an ELD in. You get it? But if you can keep your drivers to answer these questions correctly in a 30-day period where they do this wrong 8 or less times, you can just have 6 time cards. No logbooks, no ELD. We're done. Don't need it, right? Now, non-CDL truck is a different one. Instead of 100 air miles, you get 150 air miles. Instead of this leave and return and go home within 12 hours, you can leave and return and go home within any time, right? Non-CDL.
But how do you figure out what, I see the 100 air miles is 115. What is the 150?
172 and a half. So if you put an address down here and an address down here and it's 163 miles, is that within 150 air miles? Yes. So if you left and returned to the spot and you did 160 miles, that would cover the 150 for a non-CDL truck. Then the second one would be you have to leave and return, but you don't have to come back within 12 hours. You just have to come back within the hours for the day. Then you need 10 hours off, can't drive more than 11, and you need a time card. So the only difference between this one and the non-CDL 150 is 50 more miles, and get rid of the 12-hour thing. It's whatever the work day is.
So
Right.
if there's one day a week they go over the mileage,
Yep.
you're okay?
Yes, you can go over the mileage as much as you want. You just need a logbook that day. Just that day. No other day, just that day. If you go over these questions more than 8 times in a 30-day period, they have said you need an ELD. So if I can control my driver fleet and have no driver exceed these questions or the non-CDL one, more than 8 days in 30, then I can run time cards and no ELD. I'm done. I don't need them, right? And when they do go over, I just fill out a paper log. Just that day. I get pulled over. Boo! Driver, where's your logbook? I only have 1 page. 1 page? Yeah, it was 4 days ago. Well, where's the rest of your logbook? I don't need it. I'm a 100 air mile radius driver all the time, except I did a 13-hour day 4 days ago, so here's my log from that day. Where's your time cards? At the company. Well, why don't you have them? Because the regulation says I don't have to have them. Now, if you want to be preemptive, we can make a white paper that says, driver, if you do not fill out a logbook. If you don't do this, fill out a logbook today. We manage the 8 days and 30, so he doesn't need to worry about that. We just tell him to finish. And then he says, if you get pulled over, hand the officer this sheet. And it'll say, dear officer, our driver is primarily 100 air mile radius. In the event that he doesn't, he completes the logbook, see attached. We do not have him keep his time cards in the truck on a regular basis because he's not required to. There's a question and answer guidance on the website that says, are you required to keep your time cards in the truck if you're a 100 air mile radius guy? Answer, no. So you copy and paste that on there and you give it to the officer. Now, are we teaching the officer how to be an officer? Yeah, but who cares? It's fine. You know, not a big deal. So we 100% understand this 100 air mile versus the 150. Go ahead. You do not need, if it's 1 day, a paper log's fine. You want to hear how crazy this is? Let's say that you are a 100 air mile radius guy all the time. Then your company says, we need to go from Wisconsin to Texas. Ugh. We're making a 4-day trip. Do you normally go to Texas? No. Do you normally stay within 100 air miles and you always answer these correctly? How many days will it take to go to Texas and back? 4? Can you run a paper log to Texas? Yes. Yes. Because how many days in 30 did he need a paper logbook? 4. Did he need them the other 26? No. Is that more than 8? No. Can he run to Texas with a paper log? Yes. Does he need an ELD? No. Do I have an owner of a company right now? He goes out 8 days.
He makes 3 trips, then he's ELD.
If he makes 3 trips, then he's ELD. If he makes 2 and the rest is local, no ELD. He can run over the whole country. You could send a guy out for 8 days, come back, run local the rest of the time. No ELD. Completely legal. Crazy, right? Now, knowledge is power. You must know these rules to take advantage of them. Why does no one know them? Because paper just lied, right? Now you can't lie. We need to take advantage of these, right? So you guys are clear that if you're a 100 air mile radius guy, paper. Don't exceed more than 8 days where you run paper, so you don't need an ELD. If you have 6 drivers and you need to do this every once in a while, send her out for 8, send you out for 8, send you out for 8, send you out for 8. Don't get to 9. Control that on a dispatching side and you'll never need an ELD. So is it a loophole? Yeah. Now, does that mean let them run paper and lie? No. But I'll tell you, does paper give more flexibility in reality? Now, am I promoting that? Not really. But do you have a right to know what the rules say? Yes. And I'm almost done here. What's on the horizon? 4 changes are coming. These are nice. I would say that the majority of you, if you didn't before, if this comes to fruition, you're not going to need ELDs, right? First one, short haul. I just told you about the 100 and 150 air mile, right? The CDL and the non-CDL short haul. I told you about the 8 days. I told you who needs an ELD. I told you who can run time cards, right? We're clear? What sucks about the 100 air mile radius right now? The 12-hour thing, right? Wouldn't it be nice if that was 14? They're proposing changing that provision to 14. Instead of leave and return and go home within 12 hours, the 100 air mile radius will be changed to leave and return and go home within 14. Now, does that eliminate some ELDs? Yes. Now when you work a 13-hour day, guess what's going to be okay? Time card. Do you know that that 12-hour thing already exists at 14 if you're a ready mix hauler? So if you haul wet cement in a ready mix truck, it is, the 100 air mile is leave and return and go home within 14. So why does one industry get 14 and no one else does? That's the complaint. So that's one change they're proposing. This comment period ended October 10th, 2018. So it just ended. I commented to this one, right? Because you could comment. Next one is adverse. Right now I told you adverse conditions, you can only extend the 11, remember? They want to make it so you can extend the 14 up to 2 hours as well. So if you have an accident that is unanticipated, now what I would say with an accident, if you have cameras, save the camera footage that there was an accident. Right? Evidence, remember? Save that, right? So adverse conditions, you can exceed it with the 14. 30-minute break, they're thinking of getting rid of it. And if not getting rid of it, modifying it. Wouldn't that be nice? Maybe only make it for over the road. And then split sleeper, right? Does anybody have sleeper trucks? Right? Sleeper berth? You had talked about how come drivers don't know this. How many drivers know how to split sleeper? They don't. Now, how does that benefit you? Get this, how crazy this is, right? Let's say that I'm driving from New York to Chicago, or to Wisconsin. New York to Wisconsin, I have to go through Chicago. And I drove and then I loaded for 3 hours off duty in the break room. So I just took a 3-hour break a little bit ago, right? Like a few hours ago. I'm in my 14, I took a 3-hour break and I'm driving. You get it? So now, that 3-hour break, I get to Gary, Indiana, right before Chicago's truck stop, right? Because I'm over hours. I hit my 14. I need to take how much? 10, right? Because that's your break, 10. Well, if I take 10, do I get this 3 back? No. But can I take 8 in the sleeper and take 2 of this 3 and call that my 10? Yes. So now, if I would have woke up at 7 a.m. after 10 hours off and I drive through Chicago, what am I? Stuck? What if I can go through Chicago at 5 a.m., right? I can go through at 5 a.m. by taking 8 and grabbing 2, giving me 10. And I can get through Chicago at 5 a.m. Is that better? Yeah. Here's another one. We get to your facility. You're at the 14th hour. You say, man, go park over there. It's going to be 2 hours before we get back to you, right? So you go off duty for 2 hours, right? Off duty for 2 hours. Then you go yard move for an hour to load. Now you push PC and drive 10 minutes to a truck stop. Then you can take 8 in the sleeper and add the 8 to the 2 you took at the shipper. So now, did you get your break interrupted? No. You did 2, an hour on duty yard move, then drove a little bit PC, then took 8 in the sleeper. 8 plus the 2 is your 10. You just took your 10. How many drivers know that? Now, how many drivers get stuck? Because you can go either way. Let's say I get there at my 14th hour, and I'm at 7.5 hours in my sleeper, and they go like this. Go pull up to dock 12. What should that driver tell them? 7.5 hours in their sleeper, and they get this, and they say, go to dock 12. The driver should say what? Give me half an hour more. Give me a half an hour, because then guess what that whole 8 hours waiting at the truck stop turns into? 8 of his 10. So then he can do the 8, unload, off-duty drive to a truck stop, take 2, take this 8, add it to the 2, and he's good. He got interrupted in his 10, and it's fine. Not a big deal, right? Now, what's restrictive about that? 8 and 2. Wouldn't it be nice if he was at 7 hours and they went like this and you could do 7 and 3? Wouldn't it be nice if you were 6 hours in and they went like this and you could do 6 and then do 4? Would you say that's a good idea? That's what they're proposing to change. They're going to literally let you get there, get delayed 5 hours while you're off duty, then PC to work at the place in yard move, then PC to a truck stop for half an hour, take 4.5 and do 5 and 5. Who thinks that's great? Now, if your drivers don't know how to split the 8 and the 2, do you think they're going to be able to figure out how to do it when it's 7 and 3, 6 and 4, and 5 and 5? So what's important? We got to teach them. Now, am I making a living right now teaching people hours of service that have been in a book for 20 years? Yeah, it's crazy, right? Now, what do we want to do? We want to make as much money as possible, do it as safe as possible, correct? As much money as possible, do it as safe as possible. If you believe using some of these tricks aren't going to make your driver unsafe, well, then use them. If you think that using some of these tricks are not in the best interests of safety, then don't. Example would be 6 a.m., 2 p.m., doesn't take a break, works for 3 hours, then takes a 30-minute break driving to a truck stop 38 miles away. Who thinks that's a good idea? Legal, but maybe not a good idea. Fair? All right, I think that's it. I said I'd stay within an hour, and I stayed within an hour because we got started 7 minutes late, and I am 7 minutes past 11:45, so I am pretty proud of that. You guys have any questions? I'm going to stick around in here while you guys go to lunch, and I will make sure every question is answered before I leave. So if anybody wants to come up with questions, but I'm not going to hold you past the hour. So thank you guys for your time. I appreciate you having me back again this year. It was a real good time.